Hello and welcome back to the news from Kazakhstan. I am Max Bagushev and these are the headlines. The danger of floods is growing in western Kazakhstan. The Emergencies Ministry has stepped up operations and begun evacuating pregnant women from the area. The National Security Committee summons most staff members of the Golos Respublika newspaper for questioning. A number of public organizations calls for resignation of the Prosecutor General for the allegedly fabricated terrorism case. Kazakh MPs promised to help Kizlyarda-based company BIS, which recently lost a bid to Chinese investors. In the meantime, employees of the winning company Petro Kazakhstan are already planning a strike due to poor working conditions. Emergency services have stepped up their operation in western Kazakhstan, expecting the water level in Ural River to rise significantly at any moment.
Minor floods are possible, just like last year in April. Back then, 13 settlements were flooded with 6,000 residents evacuated. The MES claims the nature is unpredictable and is reluctant to provide forecasts. At the moment, MES is carrying preventive blasting in Ural Basin. The highest danger is posed from the water levels of Terkul, Shagan, Big and Small Uzeni rivers. As reported by Kazakh Weather Bureau, western Kazakhstan has the highest snow accumulation, which is currently estimated at 60 centimeters. Thawing could start any time, and specialists do not want to make any predictions. The water level of the river is expected to be higher than usual, about 30–80%, so everything depends on weather conditions. In case of strong warming or precipitation, the floods are possible.
Day 4 of the trial of Zhanaozen violence saw Judge Aralbek Nagashibayev changing the preventive measure towards one of the defendants to a house arrest. Anwarbek Tajiev was shot and wounded in a leg during the December riots and now requires medical supervision. Meanwhile, case victims continued to retract their claims against the 37 defendants. Find out more from the next report.
The judge had announced a 20-minute break before the hearing even began due to the petition of attorney Yerzhan Telektesov, who asked for a medical examination of his client. Anwarbek Tajiev was shot and wounded in the foot during the unrests, and the doctor said he needed full body examination. The judge had granted Tajiev bail and changed his measure of restraint to house arrest. I'm changing Tajiev's measure of restraint to house arrest. He is also not to communicate with people related to the case, not to receive or send mail, not to use any means of telecommunication, and not to leave his residence in Aktau. According to Tajiev's lawyer, the health condition of his client is critical. The doctor from the regional hospital who examined Tajiev said he needed urgent foot treatment. This detention facility doesn't have proper conditions for that. Therefore, I made a request to the judge to change the measure of restraint. A bail was granted. Just like in previous days, yesterday's hearing saw victims retracting their claims against defendants and saying they no longer ask the accused for compensation. I no longer stand behind my original claim. I retract it. However, according to attorney Ardak Batieva, retracted claims do not affect the severity of the charges. They may or not demand the compensation. It is their right. At the same time, claim retraction doesn't mean the crime didn't take place. It only proves the lack of damages. The regional court representatives have once again organized a series of supporting events like a press conference involving Kazakh MPs and veterans. This time it was turned for representatives of two local NGOs who spoke in Kazakh and Russian about transparency of the Zhanaozen trial. Lawyer Zhaksugul Makhanbetova was asked about the ban on all recordings during the process. Well, there should be no obstacles when the trial is in process. Therefore, I think broadcasting it on the TV screens is the right way to do it, as you can still see everything. Judge Aralbek Nagashibayev had chaired the trial till noon only and then adjourned it until Monday. The rest of Friday and Saturday, attorneys intend to spend working with their clients in the detention centers.
The situation linked to the Kizlyarda-based company BIS, which had to suspend operations following a lost contractor bid, is now actively discussed in Astana. Company director Dildakhan Akhmetov, who returned from the capital last night, says parliament members as well as a number of well-known politicians promised to help the businessman by reaching the cabinet head and setting a special commission up to investigate the issue at hand. BIS gets all clear from the capital. Didahan Akhmetov, director of BIS service company, is pleased with the outcome of his trip to Astana. Following a lost tender, the company employees have been out of business for nearly a month. The entrepreneur from Kizilorda was promised help by some MPs and a number of politicians. After a thorough review of his company's case, a committee will be formed that will get to the bottom of the situation. The businessman still believes that certain authorities are to be blamed here. Akhmetov is certain that because of the actions of some regional officials, the service company that had been successfully operating in the oil market over 10 years is now completely idle. My conclusion on takeover comes from realization that it was all agreed not just by heads of district administrations and members of local councils. I'm pretty certain that this case that left 700 people out of work had something to do with the head of regional administration. There were certain persons behind Kiran and NTK. It was a conspiracy. Everyone in the south knows that Kiran means Jaisan, a member of the regional council. NTK, the second company, had nothing to do with oil transportation. According to Dildahan Akhmetov, the second winning bidder for transportation of oil and produced water belongs to Nurulbek Nalibayev. The ex-businessman is currently the head of Shilinsk regional administration. Both high-ranking officials were part of the plot against service company BIS, says Akhmetov. Apparently, they were in need of well-established business and they got what they wanted. However, he believes that soon they would realize that it's a Chinese trap. Chinese managers need only those who will do what they are told, totally ignoring and social obligations in the region. By reducing rates, the Chinese company will get rid of local enterprises and instead will ask for additional quote for Chinese workers from Kazakh government. The Chinese keep the policy of ruining strong, well-established companies by simply discrediting them by all possible means. They install new, inexperienced companies instead, who in their turn would soon be discredited as well because they won't be able to handle a job they don't know. In any case, a quote would be expected from the government. Stan video portal managed to record a comment of only one person involved in this conflict. Jaisan Sizdikov, a member of the regional council and a businessman himself in the past, was unreachable. His phones are switched off and there is no access to the council without a special pass. Nurulbek Nalibayev completely denies all allegations and states that if anyone suspects him of being a businessman who got into power, they should go to court. Do check everything, get it documented, you will see. I have nothing to do with this. I'm a governmental official. I don't even know what company you are talking about. I don't even work in Kizilorda, I work in a different district. Kazakhstan is not reporting to me. They do not operate on my territory. I have nothing to do with it. Whatever BIS may say, that's it. It's dead quiet at the Kumkol field where once contractor company BIS was operating at full steam. The entire fleet of BIS specialized equipment is off-road. Only security staff are in the shift camps. Out of all the working personnel, the rest were given leaves without pay. Yergali Kaumbayev, an experienced mechanic, had to requalify as a security guard. He says he's ashamed to go back home. That's why he decided to stay. I cannot go back home. What I'm going to tell my children? What shall I say to my grandchildren? I'm the only one employed in my family. The children are students. My wife is disabled. I'm the only breadwinner. I'm over 50. Where can I apply for a job? No one will employ me. In the meantime, it became known that the workers of the winning companies are ready to start a strike. The people are not happy with the conditions of work and accommodations. Economist Mukhtar Tajin believes the Kumkol scandal in Kizilorda region actually has deep roots and the authorities should finally listen to the complaints of Kazakhstan's workers. They say their rights are violated by the Chinese company Kazakhstan and also by the lost bid which left 700 people unemployed.
Kumkol deposit is developed jointly by foreign investors who own 67% of oil and natural gas shares. However, the Chinese companies working in Kazakhstan are well known to cause trouble, for instance, in the migration sector. Experts say people in charge of important decisions about the economy often neglect long-term planning, and unfortunately, conflicts similar to the one in Kumkol is just the tip of the iceberg. What we see at Kumkol right now is a labor conflict. We witnessed open clashes between Chinese and Kazakh workers in Aktyubinsk, and the investigation revealed that those Chinese workers were illegal migrants. I'm afraid that there are many more conflicts like these.
On Friday, the National Security Committee continued to summon staff members of the oppositional newspaper Golos Respubliki for questioning. Yesterday, it was the publisher deputy director's turn. Vzglyad newspaper chief Igor Vinyavsky, who was recently released from jail, was summoned as well. Journalists called the law enforcement's actions pressure, and while there is a gagging order, many believe the case is linked to the prevented terrorism attack on Almaty, supposedly conspired by the exiled politician Mukhtar Ablyazov.
Güzel Baydalinova, the deputy director of the weekly newspaper, was given summon yesterday. A plainclothes officer brought the interrogation invitation right to her workplace. It was not specified whether Baydalinova is a witness or someone else, just like it was in 3 other cases with her colleagues. Of course, I did not let him in after previous disgraceful behavior of officials. The day before yesterday and earlier, officers just acted in total lawlessness. They detained our staff without the presence of lawyers. Our colleagues were treated like criminals. That's why I told him that I won't let him in, and if he wants to speak, he should do it through the window. At least he was polite, handed me summons, and said that we probably came across with some other guys who behaved disgracefully. Another media representative, chief editor of Vzglyad newspaper Igor Vinyavsky, was to arrive in the office of the National Security Committee at 3 p.m. as well. He was acquitted just recently on March 15, when the investigation dropped the charges of calling for violent change of the constitutional system of Kazakhstan. Before that, Vinyavsky spent almost 2 months in jail. Now he is summoned for a new interrogation. It looks to be linked to the terrorism case the one media is talking about, which involves Pavlov and Kitibayev preparing terrorist acts, something like that. The fact is that I know Kitibayev personally. We met once in Europe. Probably I will be questioned about him. Yulia Kozlova and Irina Mednikova, staff members of Respublika newspaper, received additional summons for interrogation in the National Security Committee yesterday. Their status is still unclear. Interrogation will be held today at 3 p.m. The whereabouts of the Golos Respubliki newspaper director, following the initial conversation with the security officers on Wednesday night, is still unknown.
There is still no communication with Daniel Moldashev, the publisher of Kazakhstan's oppositional newspaper Golos Respubliki. Its staff fears that Moldashev could be pressed by authorities for a possible mental breakdown. The publication's chief editor, Tatiana Trubacheva, says Moldashev appeared extremely depressed the last time she saw him in front of the National Security Committee headquarters.
Nevertheless, the staff hopes that their director will eventually contact them in the nearest future, just like last year. Last time Moldashev called from Minsk, Belarus. He, however, gave no explanation for being there.
Vzglyad newspaper chief editor Igor Vinyavsky and Golos Respubliki deputy publishing director left the National Security Committee after about 3 hours of questioning, saying the law enforcement acted completely within the law. Both journalists are now considered case witnesses, but the gagging order prevents them from revealing more details.
I was summoned as a witness. Unfortunately, I cannot disclose the case and details of interrogation due to the gagging order.
Leaders of public organization and oppositional politicians call for the resignation of Prosecutor General Askhad Daulbayev. The petition was signed by representatives of 28 organizations so far. Oppositionists believe that statements of the prosecution office regarding the prevention of a terrorist attack on March 24, supposedly conspired by Mukhtar Ablyazov, his former head of security, and one of the leaders of the oppositional party Alga, does not hold up very well. Activists oppose the idea of the authorities turning the population into a frightened majority and intend to continue holding protest rallies and piquets.
We take this statement as a threat to our personal freedom, security and independence from legal mayhem of the Prosecution Office, National Security Committee and law enforcement agencies. We demand the Prosecutor General to present irrefutable evidence behind this statement, something other than self-incriminations and confessions of the case defendants. The Prosecutor General, Askhad Daulbayev, should resign otherwise.
Members of the People's Front movement in Karaganda demand the authorities to end the ongoing so-called witch hunt immediately. This is how activists understand the recent statement of the prosecution office regarding the prevented terrorist attacks in Almaty.
I believe there is a political inquisition in our country which I am personally subjected to as well. I am being followed every day. I plainly see cars following me. Any person opposing the system is prosecuted. We're not allowed to hold legal rallies and assemblies. This situation looks more like a witch hunt. The party Alga pending registration accuses the General Prosecutor's Office of slander, claiming that their statements about the party being connected to the terrorist attacks in Almaty is not true. This is nothing but dirty insinuation, says Valentina Makhotina. Nevertheless, horrible accusations is an indirect indication of how the authorities intend to treat anyone who opposes them. It is unknown what kind of repressions will follow after the surfacing of the supposed fight against pseudo-terrorism. This is nothing but a political game, says the leader of the Alga branch in Karaganda. I would rather advise the authorities to hire more professional playwrights to orchestrate these things. Everything is quite obvious here. The authorities want to draw people's attention away from the Zhanaozen trial, as everybody is carefully following it. So now they decided to present our party as not a political, but a terrorist organization.
Bahidjan Ketibayev, the brother of one of the suspects in the case of alleged terrorist attacks in Almaty and the board chair of the kplus group of companies, believes the charges are ridiculous but could have disastrous consequences for people who could be pressed for confessions and other information on the case. In his interview to Regnum news agency, Bahidjan Ketibayev noted that Kazakh authorities will have a hard time proving their allegations.
It is likely that there will be both a trial and a verdict in Kazakhstan, but Kazakh authorities will encounter problems presenting these decisions in Europe because apart from confessions, there should be at least some evidence. I believe that if Ablyazov wanted to use terrorism, his resources would make it easier for him to buy a couple of missiles and launch them at Nursultan Nazarbayev's residency, or stuff a Boeing 757 with explosives. But planting bombs at Al-Farabi Avenue pedestrian crossings is the imagination level of a district policeman, said Kitibayev in his interview to Regnum.
Kazakhstan's politicians and political experts also believe that the statement of the prosecution office regarding the prevention of a terrorist attack should be supported with evidence. Otherwise, this is nothing but another round of repressions against the opposition, say experts.
More comments are being made about the prevented terrorist attack in Almaty on March 24th, supposedly conspired by exiled banker Mukhtar Ablyazov. Political scientist Mukhita Sanbay reminds everyone about the presumption of innocence, which is currently being ignored by the authorities, claiming the suspects are guilty before the start of the trial. This haste proves that the government has made another move in the political game. The security officials are nervous because something is obviously going on in the country. But what would you expect when there is an information war going on between the government and opposition represented by Ablyazov? I don't see anything new here. Public activist Gazi Saldamzharov draws a parallel. There was a similar situation at the beginning of the millennium. Back then, security guards of the ex-Prime Minister Akizhan Kazhigeldin were accused of staging a coup. The trial went ahead, but a year later, Pyotr Afanasyenko and Sanjar Ibraev petitioned for pardon and were released. Later, one of Afanasyenko's colleagues told the press that the whole scandal was staged and the defendants were physically and psychologically coerced during the interrogations. I can compare the current situation to the Kazhigeldin's case because I kept track of those events. At that time, his guards were accused of attempting a coup with 2 Berdan rifles and 2 guns. It looked ridiculous, but they managed to prove the charges and bang the guys up in jail. I've heard so many stories about anti-president plots, but seen no real facts so far. This time, however, the situation is more complicated, says Pyotr Svoikda, an SDP presidium member. Charges of terrorism are a sure way to mop up the opposition camp. It is rather difficult to field a winner in the first round, but what appears to be clear is that there will be only one man standing in the end. The current situation is a tight knot. The warring parties, the government and radical opposition, have no way other than, well, not exactly mutual extermination, but fighting to the end. Even if the government's course doesn't result in total mop-up, they will continue taking violent turns. New evidence of the prevented crime are expected to be presented to the public in the nearest future. The upcoming trials have also been scheduled. Otherwise, the highlight declarations of the supervision authorities will be considered as unsubstantiated.
Kazakhstan's Communist Party could soon be terminated altogether, said its leader Aziz Aldamjarov in his recent Interfax interview. The reason for that is linked to the situation around the organization's Kokshetau branch. The prosecution office considered a violation several publications in a local Akmala newspaper signed by the branch secretary Sergei Ryzhov. Supposedly, Ryzhov had no right to publish any information on the party's behalf, since its activity was suspended until April 24th.
I was given the floor and there was a name tag in front of me. When the meeting was over, I passed a printed copy of my speech to the regional administration, but since I was invited as the first secretary, I signed it as Secretary Ryzhkov, the first secretary of the regional committee. Lyudmila Gorbenko, a public figure, found herself in a similar situation when she published a news digest representing different publications in a party-owned newspaper Iskra. The City Office of Public Prosecution has taken her actions as illegal and fined her for the amount of 50 minimum calculation indexes. It should be noted that CPK was suspended for 6 months as of October last year in view of participation of Mr. Aldamjarov in an unregistered movement called People's Front. We offered excerpts from different publications in that issue, which was informative in nature, and it was not intended to throw insults at anybody. Basically, it contained materials from Vremya and Vzгляд newspapers, as well as Russian Communist Party information, that is, materials from registered publications licensed to sell their periodicals.
The prosecution office did not confirm the party's possible suspension, and the representative of its Akmala city branch, Ahmet Balmashev, said he does not have enough information for commenting the issue.
I have no information yet. Call me a bit later. I've just learned about it recently and I have no information so far.
The other Social Democratic Party activist Mikhail Barsukovsky says he is being abused by local law enforcement. Apparently, Barsukovsky could be charged with verbally assaulting a police officer, and the activist believes this how law enforcement are carrying out special instructions from the authorities, annoyed by the opposition's active position.
Mikhail Barsukovsky from Sherbakhtinsky district has been out of favor with the rural authorities for quite some time. The 57-year-old businessman strongly opposes the abuse of power by the officials, leaving no stone unturned, doing whatever possible without breaking the law. The active member of the National Social Democratic Party has recently started filming cases of violations by the officials and law enforcement agencies. He posts his video on the internet. We are building a democratic state, but at the local level the situation is entirely different. There is false reporting, lying and fraud. Mikhail Barsukovsky says he's not looking for fame. He's a Sherbakhtinsky resident, born and raised, and he's pained for his wronged fellow villagers. That's why he goes out of his way to help people to make their lives better. His active social stance does not go along with the authorities, and they've decided to put some pressure on him, says the Social Democratic Party member. Currently, he faces an accusation of insulting a policeman, which never took place, according to the party member himself. No one else does this community work here in the village, and they say I'm in their way, right? They think if they manage to threaten me, they would go on doing whatever they like. The policemen, the state officials, you see what I mean? What I believe it won't happen, and people in their right minds up there will hear our voices. As part of his activism, Barsukovsky helps Svetlana Bondarenko, a mother of a large family, as well as many other residents of Sherbakhtinsky district. For instance, he renders legal advice. According to Bondarenko, her eldest son, Vitaly, was recently subjected to police brutality, so the villager has to camp on the doorstep of various official bodies in search of justice. She's sure that the social activist simply annoys the authorities. This is the reason why they are trying to threaten him. He's an absolute nuisance for them, because Barsukovsky is a very fair man. He's always trying to help those who really cannot get any help anywhere. Let's take us, for instance. We are a large family with many children. As they say, we live from hand to mouth, not very rich people. The information from the Sherbakhtinsky police office states that there was an incident of a policeman insulted by Mikhail Barsukovsky. Allegedly, there are witnesses of the active member of the National Social Democratic Party swearing at the district police officer. As for complaints of the social activists of persecution, according to the law enforcement officers, such complaints have no ground. There are no special instructions. I already explained that incident was caused by Mikhail Barsukovsky himself. There isn't any special instruction as such. Despite everything, Mikhail Barsukovsky is firmly intended to keep on working. Someone must stay in the way of abuse of power by the officials and the police, believes the Social Democrat.
This is all we have time for now. Join us next week for more updates or follow us on YouTube. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.